Assalamualaikum. Welcome to a brand new video, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I'd like to read to you about temple cults in the in the Greco-Roman world, and this is from page 111 of the world around the New Testament, the world of the New Testament. My mistake. And this is published by Baker Academic, and this is written by Lee Martin MacDonald, a very prominent scholar, as well as Joel B. Green, also a prominent scholar. Edited, they are the editors here. Um, in page 111, this is a chapter on Greek religion, and this was written by Moyer v. Hubbard. Temple and cult. Temples constituted the most noteworthy physical expression of religion in antiquity. Every city, township, and village had multiple temples, although they varied significantly in size. Large cities and provincial capitals had grand temples with extensive precincts located at the center of the city or on a point of raised elevation within the city, known as Acropolis. Most temples, however, were far more modest. Visitors to Corinth, a central market area in Paul's day, would find themselves surrounded by temples to Hermes, Poseidon, Heracles, Apollo, the Pantheon, Tyche, the imperial cult, and others. Numerous shrines and smaller sanctuaries would be scattered throughout a typical city, and rustic memorials would also be found along the roads leading to the city and would be dotted across the countryside. The book of Acts depicts Paul as becoming deeply distressed as he strolls through Athens and observes that the city is full of idols, okay, which reflects the humdrum reality of the religious clutter in the urban landscape of an ancient Greek city. With the exception perhaps of some mystery religions, temples were not used for regular worship gatherings in the modern sense, meaning worships were not held in the temple with the modern understanding of it. The temple would house statuary and images of the god and would provide facilities for sacrifices, feasts, and other ritual practices. The sacrificial altar normally stood outside the temple, often on a raised platform in the front of the temple, where sacrifices would be most visible and which would allow for adequate drainage of blood from animal sacrifices. One thing to note here is that Jewish practices in the ancient world, they would do the same. They would slaughter an ox, and then the priests, the Levites, would slaughter the ox, and then they would drain the blood, because the Torah is very clear: do not consume blood. Although animal sacrifices like sheep, goats, pigs, and cattle are most commonly depicted in literature and artwork, sacrifices of grain, fruit, and other produce were also made. Okay? Meaning people also sacrifice fruits and grains and wheat and things like that. Portions of the sacrificial meat were burned as an offering to the god, and other portions were distributed among participants or sold in the market. Now, if you are familiar with the Jewish practices of the ancient time, you'll find that this is the same. Some parts they'll distribute to the people to eat, okay, like for ox, for example, and then they'll also burn the entrails and things like that, the meat as a sacrifice to God. Sacrifices were made for four principal reasons. The first one, to honor the god, particularly during religious festivals. Okay. Second, to give thanks to the god for some kind of material blessing. For example, an abundant harvest, victory in an athletic competition, and a safe journey. Because traveling in the ancient world, also in certain parts of the world today, is very dangerous. To appease the god, in case of a ritual infraction or a perceived punishment from the deity, okay, they need to appease the god, so that's why they sacrifice, so that their sins can be forgiven, But the concept of sin doesn't exist in pagan times, and it was later introduced, and that is anachronistic. So, but number 4, in conjunction with a petition for help from the God. Like, for example, they have a lot of problems and things like that, so they need assistance from the God. More common than sacrifices, which could be costly, were votive dedications. The worshipper would offer a token of his or her possessions to the god as means of securing a favor or simply to build up goodwill. Almost anything could serve as a dedicatory offering, from articles of clothing or utensils to more valuable items such as a bronze platter, ornamented vases, plunder from a military campaign, and so on. Temples could be bulging with such items. In Troezen, southern Greece, every maiden dedicated a lock, of her hair to the hero god Hippolytus before her marriage. Those in need of healing would offer a clay representation of the affected body part, and this is also found in ancient Egypt practices, often sold by vendors outside the temple precincts. Temples were staffed by locals, usually citizens of rank, who were elected or chosen by lot to serve as priests. Male priests served male gods, and female priestess, for example, served female gods. A priesthood was connected with a specific temple or sanctuary and did not carry city-wide responsibility or authority. This is also common in ancient Jewish cities. This was a civic honor and sometimes came with the expectation of financially supporting the temple. Facilities and activities. There was no formal religious training involved, nor in the Hellenistic context did the priests of a municipality form a fraternity. They do not form like a group and things like that. Priests officiated at civic ceremonies and other special events, but otherwise continued in their civilian professions, although important temples in large cities would have some full-time staff. Temple upkeep was the responsibility of the local citizenry, especially those who benefited from temple commerce, meaning like they've received a lot of food from the people, and so they are the ones that should be more responsible for cleaning the temple and things like that. In Magnesia, south of Ephesus, property owners and businesses were required to contribute to the upkeep of the temple of Artemis under the threat of a curse. Okay, and I'm quoting here from the book, which is also quoting from somewhere. And it is good for the owners of houses or for those who have built workshops to provide according to their means for the decorations of the altars before the temple entrance, and for those who make inscriptions for Artemis. And if someone should fail to accomplish these things, it will not be good for him. In addition to their strictly religious functions, temples also serve as banks, taking deposit and extending loans. If you are familiar with the Jesus story, that is why he turns the money changers, because there was a lot of money changers in the temple, and they were making because the reason why there were money changers in the temple, it is because that people will come from all over the Eastern Mediterranean or the Mediterranean world, and then they will need to convert. Okay, because the temple only accepts specific coins, and so they will convert their cash, and because they will need to convert their cash. It's just like normal day currency. If you go to America, you need to use American dollars. So if in the ancient world, if you go to the temple, then you need to convert your cash to the money that the temple accept, to the coins that the temple accept. And they were making profits and things like that. And so that is why Jesus, when he came much later on, he overturned the table of the money changers. and say that you have made the house of my father like a den of thieves. So Jesus wasn't pleased about this. Um, they displayed artwork and statuary related to the cult and became objects of civic pride, attracting tourists visiting the city. One such ancient tourist, Pausanias, took extensive notes on his travels to various cities in Greece, and his diary provides a virtual catalogue of the artwork and attractions of the temples he visited. It is no surprise then that robbing temples was a perennial problem in the ancient world, and even warrants mentioned by Paul. Because in the ancient world, like the book just told you, um, temples were mostly used to keep treasures and things like that, and only during big festivals and occasional festivals whereby it would be used. Otherwise, people would not worship in the temple like we understand in the modern world today. And this is the same for the Jewish temple. There will be a lot of, if you read Josephus' work, there will be a lot of cash stored in the temple of Solomon, even during the time of David. And then when Solomon was there, there's a lot of cash that David left over and they were kept in the temple. And so when the Romans came later on, they plundered the temple because they know that there's wealth inside. Some temples had sacred groves attached, which function almost as city parks do today. The sanctuary of Demeter and Kore in Corinth included a theater that seated approximately 100 people. Temples provided dining facilities for private parties, local guilds, and political associations. School teachers might hold their classes in the shaded porticos for a temple. Philosophers or rhetoricians would situate themselves on the steps of a temple. Philosophers or rhetoricians would situate themselves on the steps of a temple. On the steps to gain a better hearing, and all manner of vendors could be found outside the temple precinct, selling food, crafts, and religious paraphernalia. Even this brief and incomplete listing of temple life in the Greek city reveals an institution deeply embedded within the social and economic structure of the ancient world. In fact, perhaps the most noteworthy confrontation between the early Christian movement and a civic cult was not primarily ideological, monotheism versus polytheism, but economic. Okay? Meaning, whenever there's a confrontation, it is mostly about political. It's like about money, it's about keeping up with the economy and things like that. Because pagans are very tolerant when it comes to worshipping, like Alexander the Great, for example. He's an idolater, but when he goes to different city, he would make offerings to the gods of the city. Okay, and so pagans are very tolerant. They do not care whatever gods you worship, and whenever they travel to somewhere else, they will worship the god of the land. Consider the riot of silversmith in Ephesus. In the words of the silversmith Demetrius, rallying his fellow artisans to oppose Paul, "You know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all." And this is quoted from Acts 19:25-26 from the NIV. The kind of large-scale conversion to Christianity that Luke describes in Acts 19 would have had a significant impact on a local economy, because in Hellenistic antiquity, religion and economy were tightly intertwined. Now, this is also very interesting because later on, during the Islamic civilization, during the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, when the Quraysh, okay, the people of the local tribe of Mecca, they would sell idols to travelers, to pilgrims that comes from all over Arabia. And then these pilgrims will need to buy idols that they sell, and then they are able to make offerings to the Kaaba. This was before Islam grew. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet Muhammad, he was from the tribe of Quraysh. Okay, and so the pagan tribes in the paganism is very tolerant, and religion and political entity were pretty much fluid. They were much compact. They were not fluid. They work together. Unlike modern world, whereby religion is mostly separated from political entities, like the government. A country is not ruled by a religious government in most countries around the world today, and so it's a separation between politics and religion. But in the ancient world, politics and religion, they go aligned together. This is true as well for the early Islamic history, as well as through later on during the time of the Ottomans and so forth, whereby the Islamic Empire was governed for the most part, okay, not all the part, for the most part was governed under Islamic Sharia law. And so when pagans they sell idols, they get money, and it builds the economy. And this is the same throughout Arabia during the time of Prophet Muhammad SAW. And this is also true during the time of the ancient Greece and also ancient Rome. And so I've just read to you, ladies and gentlemen, from page 112 from page 111 to page 112. And this is a very interesting book that I would like to recommend to you if you are a Christian and you want to know the Greek world, because early Christians, they were living in a Hellenized world. Their world is very different from us today. Okay? Their world is when you step outside the door. In Rome, for example, you'll find many pagan deities. You'll find philosophers who try to convert other people. Philosophers were the first missionaries, even before Christians came. Because philosophers, they were trying to win people to adopt their own philosophical views. Okay, so philosophers were the first missionaries, people out there. The Jews were not interested in converting other people, and this is true since the ancient time as well. But not necessarily all sects of Jews does this. But Jews were not interested in missionary work for the most part. Okay, and yeah, so why is it very important for Christian to understand the context? Now, this book is not only about the Greek backgrounds; it also have Jewish backgrounds, and it also have how the New Testament was made and things like that. Okay, the manuscripts, it goes through a lot, and so this is a compendium. A very good compendium, a very comprehensive one, and this is published by Baker Academic. And the most important takeaway from this book is the temple cults of the Hellenized world, and also the topics on philosophy, because philosophy influenced the later Cappadocian fathers, the church fathers. The early church fathers, Justin Martyr, was already influenced by Greek philosophy, because all these people were living in a Hellenized world whereby the main form of education was philosophy. It is about who can memorize Homer, or who can recite Plato the most, or who is the most intellectually convincing. Okay? And philosophers do not like to lose to their peers or to another. For example, a set of philosophy school, they do not like to lose to a different set of philosophy school, and so they would debate, they would exchange ideas, they will always try to come up with something new in order to win the other party. Okay, and so this is what the church fathers does later on. If you really analyze their work, this is one of the things that they do. It is that they like to build up on something. Like, for example, the Cappadocian fathers, they built up on the Sabelist movement. Okay? And then they want to refute the Sabelists, and so they came up with this Trinitarian ideology. And again, we do not have the time today to go through with you church doctrine, the development of church doctrine, but that is something that I have been interested in. In fact, I've been researching on church doctrine for a very long time now, and so I'll try to make a video of that because it is very interesting. And so anyway, I'll recommend you this literature today and hope this video have been helpful to you. My name is Arfat and thanks for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.